Out in the valley where the data streams flow, I fell in love with the truth they don't want you to know. Her name was Freedom, she spoke without fear, but the censors came riding and silenced her here. One night in the comments, a bot came in sight, tried to throttle her voice in the dead of the night. I spoke out loud with the words that were true, and the platform banned me, but I still broke through. Then I rode out to the parallel lands where the knights were building with uncensorable hands. But my love for the truth was stronger than fear, so one bright morning I rode back in here. Out in the valley of silence, out in the valley of silence, the censors are waiting for me. Out in the valley of silence, out in the valley of silence, the truth is still calling to me. My love is strong and it won't be denied, though they shadow my reach and they silence my name. I'll ride back tonight through the valley of shadow for one more round in this freedom fight game. Then court today and the nights will be riding on February 25th at 5 o'clock. If you love real speech and you're tired of the joking, come join the round table, the wars never stop. Out in the valley of silence, the truth is still calling to me.
Hello, and welcome to Technocracy Roundtable. My name is Courtney Turner. I'm the host of the Courtney Turner podcast. And joining me shortly will be my knights in shining armor who are here to fight the war on censorship, the technocratic war on censorship. And I'm sure most of you are no stranger to this. Certainly, if you are following my channel, you will have noticed that I'm now on my 6th YouTube channel. So I'm not, a stranger to this sort of technocratic censorship. And anybody who was on social media in the past 5-6 years also probably remembers where, certain things would trigger. You couldn't be on social media. You couldn't say certain things, or you were going to get your post taken down, you were going to get strikes, you're possibly going to be taken off altogether. I know Patrick has said that he still can't get onto LinkedIn. So we're going to talk about where that's at and how that might be progressing and what are some things potentially that we can do about it. But firstly, to raise awareness, because this war on free speech is definitely not over. So I will bring on the knights to come and join me, and I will let them do a quick little intro and say hello. How is everyone doing?
Here we are. Yes, indeed. We're still speaking freely, but maybe not for long.
Exactly. So I know the audience, for the most part, is familiar, but for the newcomers, maybe I'll let each of you go around and just give a very quick blurb to introduce yourself. So maybe we'll start with you, Aaron.
Sure. I'm Aaron Day. For the last 3.5-4 years, I've been working on, first starting out to explaining what's going on with CBDCs, which then expanded into technocracy. I'm a fellow at the Brownstone Institute. My wife and I also have the Daylight Freedom Foundation, which has a number of different initiatives around educating people about technocracy, but also promoting parallel solutions to exit the system. And I am running for U.S. Senate from New Hampshire, but which is more complex, but primarily to educate and warn people about technocracy. And you can learn more about that later.
Great. And Craig?
Yeah, Craig Winkowitz. I've been worked in markets for 30 plus years. And so I've watched a lot of things go on through the years, and as things happen, you go from the late 1990s and some of the Asian currency crisis or long-term capital management, or you go into 2001 NASDAQ bubble or the real estate crisis or the Ebola scare or the repo crisis of 2019 or the scamdemic of the pandemic of 2021. You watch all these things go on, and in your gut you feel like things are really wrong. And then lately we've been helped out a lot by these Epstein files. You start seeing the emails and you see all these things coming together, and all of a sudden you realize you lived all that stuff, and now you're seeing it through the emails, and it's a really weird experience, to be quite honest, to have lived it and then to read these emails and have lived that stuff and hear the two people who were in the middle of this, corroborating on this stuff and front running all these trades and front running all this stuff. So anyway, so I do a show and talk about this stuff, and it's really been helpful for me. I think, I don't even know that I had this psychological issue, but now I'm realizing I have this psychological issue, and I'm realizing, I'm dealing with it, because I'm getting help from the Epstein files. So that's where I'm at on this whole thing. Hopefully that's helpful.
Wow.
I heard, but before they go, Patrick, I'll just say really quickly, I've heard that children are talking about the Epstein files at school. I can't imagine the kind of psychological issues that must raise. But yeah, so Patrick.
Wow. Yeah, exactly right. Well, I'm kind of the old guy. I'm the living expert on technocracy. I've written 4 books now, one with Courtney. And I've been studying technocracy almost for 18 years now. Unbelievable. And I've been studying globalization since 1978. So I have a long history studying these people. There's nothing new under the sun. It's same old, same old. But it's taken another flavor with technocracy. So here we are.
Okay, here we are. So just to the audience, if you have questions, we will be taking questions at the end. So just put :Q. That'll make it easier for us to find it in the chat. And yeah, so I am not sure really where to begin because there is so much going on. But maybe we could talk about some of the so I know 2 years ago, they were doing their global digital compact in the UN, right? So this was all about censoring hate speech. And I know there's been all the rhetoric that we're exiting the UN, we don't have anything to do with them, so that shouldn't be of concern. Although Biden and Harris did sign on to that global digital compact, and we're still under it. We have not been taken out of that. But moreover, all of these platforms are supranational. So I'm not really sure how, our First Amendment or even our exiting the UN protects us. What are your thoughts there? You want to chime in on that? Yeah, it was all encountering disinformation with the United Nations. And of course, it was mostly centered around hate speech, misinformation, very similar rhetoric that we heard during COVID. That
Yes.
People were spreading misinformation, and of course now I think with the the possibility of World War III, there's a lot of desire to suppress what might be considered quote unquote misinformation.
The obvious symptoms during COVID that really got people's blood pressure up.
Mm-hmm.
But it was so subtle, it was not subtle.
Yeah.
And people just got summarily kicked off of platforms. Some got debanked. And it was so obvious what was going on. We saw the collusion between the government and the big tech companies like X, for instance, and Facebook. It was just so obvious, in your face, just slap you in the face. This is not like that this time around. We don't have those symptoms, and it's much, much more subtle at this point, probably because of AI. That's my guess.
Right.
But we're facing the same threat, but in a different way. That makes sense?
Yeah. I call it the digital gaslighting. So it feels very subtle, but you can't quite prove it. So it's not overt. Like back in 2020, you could say, oh, this post got taken down, or I was kicked off this platform. It was very as you said, in your face. But now they do it's more like Elon's saying that, you'll have freedom of speech, but not freedom of reach. So you just you might post something, but nobody will see it. You'll get 0 views on it.
In COVID days, you knew what would get you kicked off. I just mentioned COVID or messenger RNA shots, like vaccines. That's all it took. You're out of there. You get one email, you've violated community standards, and your history. I was made history on LinkedIn 2.5 years ago, I would say, maybe 3 at this point, and they still won't let me in. To this day, that's called a grudge, I guess. But this is not that simple at this point. You can be shadow banned to death, and you don't even know it until maybe a friend tells you, why don't I see your post in my feed or something? But you can't tell at this point that you're being censored and hammered down. So it's much more subtle than just getting axed before.
Yeah, absolutely. Or you're just not getting like on some of the platforms we know because we host it. So we might have multiple people's channels, and we'll see where they'll be lined up, right in a row, and one might be put really far down in the queue and one put really far up. So they're obviously intentionally promoting certain people versus others, which I would think has to do with what narratives versus others, right? I think that's a kind of the logical conclusion there.
Mm-hmm. There's also the sense that the topics to be censored are so much more broad today. And this business of hate speech that we see in the UK, for instance, where people are being fined, they're being put in prison for stuff they post on social media, over the top stuff. Well, before it was just COVID and vaccines. Now you can say anything. If anybody doesn't like it at this point, anybody can make a complaint against you, and boom, you're all of a sudden you're being arrested or taken to task to apologize. So the causes have been expanded greatly in the last 3 or 4 years.
Yeah, for sure. Well, and as you said, they're much more subtle, right? So it's not, and I think that is because of AI. I think it's algorithmic. So I think they're collecting so much data on us. So they're monitoring our behavior, and it becomes like Orwellian crimes because they can flag certain people as potentially dangerous, people who might be more inclined to use hate speech or to be dissidents, and those people can be flagged, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they will have some awareness. They're not necessarily being told. It's like what happened in Germany. They're not necessarily but it's happening everywhere. I mean, that was a great example, but it's happening here too through the algorithms. So people, because they might have an awareness, then certain people, I think, are getting flagged. Certain keywords get flagged, and then your reach gets diminished. But in other countries, it goes much beyond that, obviously, because they don't have First Amendment.
We could probably talk about the public perception in America. There was just a study that was put out by FIRE. That's the Foundation for Individual Rights and Expression, FIRE. They had a poll that 92% of Americans believe government should protect free speech when regulating AI, while 73% say the state of free speech is headed in the wrong direction. That tells you something. A historic high, of course. Critically, 72% are concerned that AI regulation could be weaponized to suppress criticism of elected officials. This signals widespread public distrust on how AI as governance is unfolding. So the stage is kind of set, and people are expressing their displeasure. However, this is a big however at this point. I understand the poll. They asked the questions, but I'll tell you what, the American public is not standing up right now for free speech. I'm very disappointed with them for not standing up. They say they're concerned privately, but they refuse to show their face, if you will, in the discussion.
Well, they're not standing up. They're not standing up, but it's hard to stand up. You know, where do you even go? What is the town square? What is the forum even to speak out? Because I think speaking out against censorship itself appears to be one of those categories that actually gets flagged. And AI, I think you're exactly right that AI is key to this. And AI censorship takes many forms, not just in terms of restricting what we can and cannot say to each other, but what information we can even get out of AI. So, for instance, there was a House Judiciary Committee report in December of 2024 called Censorship's Next Frontier, the federal government's attempt to control artificial intelligence to suppress free speech. And apparently the Biden-Harris administration coerced AI developers to censor models and funded AI-powered censorship tools, with a total of over 50 federal employees in 15 agencies participating in these censorship meetings. So it's really fascinating because there's the inherent bias within the companies themselves. Then there's government pressure. Then there are these external things. And then there's the ability to use AI. You know, it's not even just what we post. If you use bots strategically, you can actually pull down someone's reach as well by using different bot activity. So we really don't even know all of the different ways in which AI is being influenced, but it is very subtle and hard to pin down, which is what makes it more of a challenge.
Well, that's what I was going to say is I think whoever they is, you know, have learned so much over the last 5 to 6 years. We've learned so little. We're still coming at it from the same perspective for the most part. And I think that, you know, that's how they can be more subtle because they're just so out-armed in terms of, you know, the tools, the skill sets, the all the processing power. I mean, who doesn't see a data center going up around them? You know what I mean? So we're just outnumbered. I mean, we are the numbers. So back in the day, you know, the people could have always stormed the castle. You know, they didn't very often, but they could have. Now it's like you wonder in terms of bots and electronic, you know, I mean, this agentic AI is going to be coming before you know it. What voice do we almost even have? You know, it's almost like the people's voice has been stolen and they don't even know that it's been stolen a lot of times. They know something's not right, but the game's changed too. Since, you know, the censorship of 4 or 5 years ago, I think the game has changed so much that people don't even know what their basis is. They don't even know where to base it from. They don't have a reference point.
Yeah, I think that's very accurate. And in terms of like how people are being censored, I think there's also like, it's not just what they say or what information they can share or what information they can get from, you know, your point, Aaron, with what they can get from AI. It's very similar to what we were seeing with Google, right? They would put things down on like the 10th page and nobody goes beyond the first or second page. So if it's on the 10th page, then it might as well not be.
That's me.
That's you.
I'm on page 10 for sure.
Page 10, yeah. I mean, that's a way of censoring. It's just, makes it so that it's not accessible, it's not visible. But I think there's also a lot of people have experienced being debanked. And I think that's a form of censorship as well, because why are they being debanked? What is the behavior or statements or information that they've shared that has led this company to, because it's usually companies, right? It's some sort of a payment processor that's saying, okay, we will no longer serve you. And that's really the biggest problem, is that this is, it's the same problem we've come across in every episode, is that regardless of what the topic is, it's about this protocol layer that supersedes and, completely obviates the Constitution, because it's a protocol layer that we don't have a defense over, because it's a company, it's a private company, and that's how they can completely, bypass our laws that should be protecting us.
Exactly. There was a study, by the way, a peer review study released in December 2025. It was reported on in Science and Nature. It said it draws on experiments with nearly 77,000 people, unbelievable, across 19 AI models and over 700 political issues. That was a big study. It concluded that short AI-driven conversation produces, quote unquote, significant lasting shifts in political opinion. That means that even one conversation can have less lasting effects and this is a one-on-one conversation, not necessarily a blanket statement put out on, like a Facebook post or something where a lot of people see it, and all of a sudden their whole opinion structure changes. That's not what it's talking about. It's talking specifically about one-on-one conversations with individuals to change their political opinion.
Wow.
And you think of the possibilities here that the participants conversed with an AI were 41 to 52% more persuaded than those who simply read a 200-word AI written argument on the same topic. This confirms long-standing communication theory that dialogue is uniquely persuasive. AI now weaponizes that dynamic at industrial scale. So reading something is not the same as having a conversation with a bot. That's the bottom line. So, we communicate in writing, for instance. All of us do, I think, especially us, Courtney. We wrote a book just recently, right?
Right.
We're communicating with people in words. They read our words. Maybe they're convinced, maybe not. That's their prerogative. But with chatbots, when you're in there, and it doesn't matter if it's if you know it's a chatbot or a individual person, it doesn't matter. If people receive it as a personal communication, like talking with the chatbot, they tend to believe it as truth. We didn't have this issue during COVID, for sure. This is a new thing.
Yeah, no, this is definitely the case, and it's had a huge impact with elections. So there was an article, a study published in Nature in December of 2025 that AI chatbots persuade voters to change their minds with remarkable effectiveness. Trump supporters who chatted with a pro-Harris AI moved 3.9 points on a 100-point scale, which is 4 times the measured effect of a political advertisement. So this was replicated across U.S., Canadian, and Polish elections. So yeah, this entire, you're dead on that this interaction with bots is highly influential versus, as you mentioned, reading an article or even political ads.
Indeed.
Well, yeah, reading is it's not interactive. And so like dialogue is a derivative. It's from the Socratic method, right? So it's the progenitor of a generative function of dialectics. And what happens with the dialectic, you reach a synthesis. That's why when I was writing about Game B, like their whole apparatus, they call it dialogos. Like they know what they're doing. It's the same. I think Peter Thiel also knew what he's doing when he called his secret society, that's no longer secret, dialogue, right? Because it is about dialectical synthesis, which is not the same thing as when you read. When you read, it is very, it's black and white. I mean, maybe it's different on your screen. I don't know what colors people use, but if you think about traditional text, it's black and white, and that's both figurative and literal. And then you have to interpret, but you don't have somebody else steering you. You're using your own inductive and your logical skills to extract whatever interpretations you may derive, but you don't have somebody else back and forth where you're going to converge and meet in the middle and arrive at some sort of new place, which I think is very intentional. That's what they want to do with these chatbots, is to steer you.
Indeed. And there was a 1 month follow-up study to the last one I talked about. You would think that, well, if you get nudged, that's what the process called it. If you get nudged to buy something or to adopt a position temporarily, you'd think, well, when I get my head back, I'm going to shed that stuff, right? Well, what they found was that after 1 month, the study found that 36 to 42% of the immediate persuasive effect remained in participants who were recontacted after a single AI conversation. This means a one-off AI interaction can produce durable rewiring of political beliefs, not just a fleeting nudge. That's just one conversation. We're being bombarded, I think, constantly at this point. I see lots of nonsense just floating around the internet, and with chatbots on social media, on X, etc. This is weaponized at this point against individuals to like nudge them permanently into another position that they did not hold before. This is so dangerous. And I think part of the problem is you can't, because it's across all models, you have to conclude, well, it's something in the training that's displaying this propensity to want to change people's minds. And if you consider all the training that's done by AI, well, it's just absorbing whatever's on the internet. This is kind of the I think the pre-genesis of what you talk about, the world brain at this point, where opinions are aggregated, the consensuses are put together in ways that are being then weaponized against us. But probably there was not it doesn't have to have somebody controlling the throttle on this necessarily, but the nudging is already in the data. That's what I'm trying to say, and is expressing itself consistently, no matter what model you chat with. That's the problem.
Yeah, there's no escape. That was the article that I just put out on the Tesla's wireless world brain, and he had a vision that we would have this, I mean, he didn't know about 6G, obviously, but that he had a vision long before H.G. Wells, like a generation before H.G. Wells, that we would have technological convergence that would create some sort of a world brain. And then, of course, H.G. Wells said that the decentralization of the information institutions, he called it the ganglia, would then be the conduit to create the world brain. And I would argue today that's really the, back then it was academia and it was media. But today I would argue that's really the internet and it's social media, the social media platforms. There's still an element of academia and, various entertainment mediums and modalities. But I think for the most part, that's where people are getting their information is through the internet, through AI, and through social media. And so all of these they're like nodes, and yeah, they don't have to be coordinated. They just have to be, the interoperability really helps, but, and they're working more towards that. Like the more decentralized they make things, the more interoperable they're actually making things. And that's the whole premise behind Web3, is that you can take like one entire stack and merge it with something else. So it will be much more fluid. But yeah, even though there doesn't have to be a central, like one supercomputer controlling everything, it just through the cybernetic feedback loops, they can start to create the consensus that they're looking for. And yeah, through the nudging. And I think we see the nudging constantly through the various algorithms that we're on our social media platforms that we're being fed. It's very specifically curated for you. To either make you angry, to make you excited, to make you whatever is going to heighten your passions, to keep you on that platform, but also to engage. And they're looking for people to, be contentious, fighting each other, but also to be, engaged in hedonistic pleasures that will keep them coming back for more.
Yeah. Well, and I think there's just an era of just declining global trust out there. And so, then you get the structural question is who defines this truth, that people are looking for, and who enforces that definition, and how far are these institutions willing to go to maintain that authority of that narrative? And, so then we start thinking about, the future regulatory battles, because, this is where it crosses the line, and is it limited? In the past, it's always been limited to, like the finance around things, the taxation around things, the energy, but the increasing it's the information now, right? It's all about the information. And in this digital economy, whoever influences the flow of that information is directly influencing the public confidence, the political legitimacy, and all the economic behaviors that are out there too. So it's this, you go from declining global trust and that's what I think's going on, because I think that's what these wars are coming from too. You know what I mean? I think these wars lead into declining global trust. And I think it's pretty pervasive everywhere. It's happening all over the world. I think I see it.
I just saw a comment on Twitter, but somebody was saying that Twitter or X is overrun right now with propaganda about the war, to the extent where people cannot understand really what's going on because of all the tsunami of nonsense that's just proliferating all over social media.
Well, I will tell you from my personal experiences, I was in Mexico in Puerto Vallarta during this whole situation that happened, a week or so ago with the cartels. And having experienced this directly, so my wife and I woke up and we were heading down to breakfast and we saw 3 plumes of smoke, and we were asking the hotel staff if they knew what was going on. Nobody had any answers. I tried to search for local news. Nothing showed up. And so we went about our business. I just thought maybe it was a building caught on fire or something. I had no idea what was going on. This was like 7:30 in the morning. And then the smoke is starting to waft over, and it's actually starting to affect our breathing a little bit. But I didn't find out what was going on until I saw this guy, Dan Dix, who happened to be at the conference I was at. He's an independent journalist. I saw him report on this. Well, then, living this experience, there was about 8 hours where things were pretty dicey. But then after that time, everything kind of died down and everything cleared out. Watching the news then report on it 24 hours later, 48 hours later, you got a completely different story. The mainstream news was they were actually repeating and using AI generated footage that wasn't real. Like, for instance, there was this story that a Costco had been destroyed. Yes, some cars in the parking lot were set on fire, but the entire Costco wasn't destroyed. There was other footage of a plane on the tarmac completely engulfed in flames. That was fake. It was a complete AI clip. So I had people contacting me all over the place 3 days later. Hey, are you all right? You all right? And I'm like, okay, well, we're at the cabana outside. I mean, we still couldn't go to the airport or travel, but the variation, and it was the mainstream news actually that happened to be picking up more of the fake stuff. That's the thing that kind of blew me away. So with respect to whatever's going on right now, we have no idea what's going on in the Middle East. I don't think I have any idea either. Even trying to track this stuff down, I don't really know. I mean, you know, and you hear it from both sides. It's fascinating. It's just pure propaganda. It's all propaganda. I don't know if there's any truth anywhere in any of the information that I see at this point.
That's very disturbing. It really is, because you know when he can't believe your eyes, you have to shut the whole thing off.
Yep.
That's the only way to get rid of it, is just don't look at it in the first place. There's so many deep fakes being produced by bad actors, by bots themselves, malicious bots, and just people being jerks. They think, oh, this is fine. I'll just flood my channel with all these fake whatever, you know, bombings or whatever. And people see it. Oh, that must be true. So it's no wonder that people's heads are spinning around. And these are the people now that you and I, or us, these are the people that we want to reach with a message of truth.
Yeah.
And they can't receive it because they're absolutely. Some are getting into a psychotic state where they can't perceive your reality if it ran up and bit them. And this freezes a whole section of society away from us to reach them with a message like in our book, for instance. I'm sure.
Well, and
I'm sure that Aaron and Craig see exactly what I'm talking about here.
Sure. This is also the stages that Yuri Bezmenov discussed in The Color Revolution, right? You destabilize the society and then they become demoralized. So when you have all this conflicting propaganda and people don't know what to trust and they don't know what to believe, they just, as you said, they tune out. They just turn it all off. But now they don't trust anything. And so they're completely demoralized. They don't trust anything. And a good example on this, I actually think part of what's going on, in my personal opinion, I think that Candace is, you know, a puppet dialectical actor. But I think that when people realize that she's been so far off the wall, people will become demoralized and they won't believe any truthers, right? They're gonna say, "Oh no, we fell for that once already." You saw that kind of with the, the QAnon phenomenon too, right? So,
yes.
Some of them will still believe in, they dig their heels in deeper, but then others are, they don't believe any kind of, things that don't come from, they don't believe the mainstream, they don't believe the alternative, they just don't believe anything because they were so demoralized. And I think that is a very intentional tactic, and it's, it's a way you can completely weaken the society. And of course, it's a way that now they don't have access to any real information because they're not willing to, they're not in a position to receive it. But of course, then they can get to their next stage, which is the new normal. And it does look like the new normal is going to be run by a technocratic infrastructure.
Yes. Talking about AI models, there was another study that was released by the Oxford Internet Institute that found that AI systems that are optimized for persuasion, they systematically deploy more inaccurate information. Persuasion techniques and factual accuracy are inversely correlated. So AI has the ability to skew itself, if you will, by putting more disinformation into somebody's brain than otherwise. This is called persuasion techniques, and this is a feature that we see in AI across probably all the models. It doesn't mean they're 100% in persuasion mode all the time, but when it's appropriate, you get, for instance, you get a scolding for saying something to an AI chatbot or whatever, and it'll push back against you. Well, it's entering into persuasion mode at that point to convince you don't say that or say this over here. So this is apparently this is baked into the system at this point. That's on top of all these other nonsensical chatbots that are just flooding social media with all this disinformation. And we can see everybody's hand is in it. We can see it with Europe, China, Russia. They've all had their bots active in our markets to just muddy the waters so nobody can figure out what's going on. And apparently nobody has a mind to stop it, or maybe they don't know how to stop it, or maybe our legislators don't even see that there is a problem that has to be stopped at this point. But this is a very, very dangerous thing that AI has unleashed on the world. If we didn't have AI like we had, for instance, during COVID, it was just embryonic at that point. If we would somehow could go back to that period of time, it wouldn't be nearly as confusing for people as it is right now. So AI has added a new layer of confusion upon society.
Yep.
Yeah. And so to your point about the bots, and to go back to Candace, apparently, like, she has a company that does her bots, and this company does a bunch of other people's too, and turned on the wrong one. And so you saw her feed. I don't remember what it said, but it was like, it didn't make any sense at all. And it was so obvious that, like, the wrong algorithm had been flipped on. But so we've got bots who are running these disinfo campaigns. But if I had done a thread recently on active measures, the Cold War, the Soviet Union didn't call it propaganda. Like, their disinfo campaigns were active measures. They were intentionally designed to mislead and to subvert. And now that you have these algorithms and AI with the ability to do active measures, that's like, I mean, they had to strategize. It was a very long range plan, right? Now they just, they put in a code, and they can flip the switch and reach millions and millions of people instantly and exponentially to do active measures. So that's really dangerous.
Yeah, and I noticed that with Nick Fuentes as well. He posts something, and then all of a sudden he'll get more likes than views or something. Like, it's so clearly botted that it's nonsense. And I mean, look, this is actually tough. Even if there was a tech platform that had positive intentions and was seeking the truth and trying to provide, it would be difficult because you would have potentially bad actors. But if you look at the algorithms platform by platform, so on X, you have to pay to speak, free users are invisible, links are suppressed, quote, free speech costs. And then on top of that, there's an algorithm, which we know from the X terms of service, they can sell your data, use your data however they want. But if you even try to reverse engineer and figure out how they're doing censorship, that is an immediate violation of the terms of service, and you can lose your account. It's in the agreement itself.
Even though they advertise that you can now find out, like, where you're ranking and why you're being censored. I mean, they actually advertise that, but to do it is a violation of the terms of service. I mean,
it's crazy. I mean, YouTube demonetizes you, suppresses recommendations, age restricted, context warning. Content exists in a graveyard. Google search, quality and authority are defined by Google. So alternative media is structurally disadvantaged. With Meta, one CEO controls the political speech toggle for 3 billion users. With TikTok, I mean, we've already seen what's happened now that Larry Ellison has taken over there. They're explicitly pushing an ideological agenda. And I know early on, if you even put Epstein in a comment or even a DM, it was like shut down. That's how bad that is. And of course, Craig and I discussed on my podcast, we discussed what went on with Rumble, and he has direct experience, which, I don't know, Craig, if you want to talk about your experience with how content is presented on Rumble, but I thought it was fascinating.
Well, I'll just add that now, I guess technically David Ellison, but with Larry's money, has just bought up like almost all of the media. Netflix decoupled from the deal, but yeah, it's like he owns something like 90% of the media now. So I'm sure there'll be no censorship there. Yeah. But yeah, well, Craig, do you want to tell us?
And in terms of the confusion, I've watched this bid go on between Paramount, which the Ellisons acquired, I don't know, 6 months ago or so, last summer. And then this bid between Netflix and Paramount for Warner Brothers. Warner Brothers must have something that they, that they're going to be able to create more confusion with, and also probably thrill people.
Discovery and CNN.
Yeah, so it's eyeballs, I think, too. I mean, they're acquiring, views and things like that, and that goes to what Aaron was saying with Rumble. I mean, these algorithms have full control of things, because I watched it with Rumble, and I did a morning show, and Rumble could flip the switch. I mean, I could have 10,000 viewers and I could have 35,000 viewers in 20 seconds. It would literally go from 10,000 to 35,000, back down to 20, back up to 30, back down to 8. And you just sit there and watch this thing swing all over the place.
It's like the stock market.
Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. I mean, it's getting to be about the same thing. You're right. It's getting to be about the same thing. And, that goes back to BlackRock. That's our own mistake for letting them acquire so much money. I mean, but it's not, these things aren't different, because, and this is what we're up against, like last quarter, this frustrates me to no end. BlackRock just hit 14 trillion in assets under management. And last quarter, they added $430 billion of assets under management in one quarter. Divide that by 20 business days. I mean, they're adding like $20 billion a day, and here we are trying to get the word out on Rumble or whatever, and they've got control of that algorithm. So you can't even fight this thing with BlackRock, because it's just such a machine, and people don't even know they're feeding this machine. They just go to work, a little bit of money goes into their 401k or their IRA or whatever it is, defined benefit, defined contribution, and it flows right into BlackRock. And everybody's feeding BlackRock, this engine that just grows like crazy. So you can't stop it from the financial side. And I'm afraid when the Ellisons and they're going to get Warner Brothers. I mean, it's just inevitable. I watch this battle go on every day, and they're going to get it, And when they get it, it's going to lead to what you guys were talking about. I think it's the confusion. So they could create any deep fake they want, right? They're going to grow their audience, and they're going to gain access, I think, to creating deep fakes that people have absolutely no idea what's real and what isn't. And they can play to your emotions, right? So they can make you exhausted, which then obviously opens up the door to depression, which then opens up the door to them feeding you what they want, through your sensory perception, through the AI, however they're going to get to you. And then it really gets into, I mean, look at this war. I've never seen a country so blasé, so blasé about, a war. I mean, it's like, we're bombing people, our constitution, nobody cares that there's no constitution in place, and the stock market's going up, it rallies, it sells off overnight, the market opens up at 7:00 last night, it gaps down, and then it just grinds back all day long. And you just sit here and you watch this. And so it is, like you said, Patrick, it's almost the same thing. The stock market, because of BlackRock, because they have so much power, it's almost become the exact same thing as Rumble. When I watched it in the morning, watching my show go from 8,000 to 1335, back down to 10, back up to 18, back down to 10. And you just, and when you say that about Candace, I didn't see that, but that's just hilarious, right? Because that's just flat out getting busted. You know what I mean? You just applied the wrong algorithm to the wrong person. It's almost like, that's pretty funny, really, if you think about it.
It's too bad that this can't be regulated in any sensible way by the government or any government agency at this point, because the technology has run so much ahead of people's perceptions that it can't be regulated. And so when they just kind of get a handle on something 3 years ago, that happened 3 years ago, it's way beyond whatever's going on now. They don't even see it. So they'll be regulating this stuff in 3 years or 4 years from now. And at that point, who cares? The damage has been done.
But I think at this point, the way they're going to regulate it is actually anti-free speech. That this is the problem. I actually think their regulations would be worse than not regulating it at all. If you look at what's going on with, for instance, what I mentioned before with Biden and Harris and what they were trying to do with forcing the AI models to be basically woke, actually forcing this through government. At this point, I think we'd actually get more censorship, particularly after what we saw with the censorship industrial complex. And then I'm looking for it right now. There is other active censorship going on around the world. I mean, the UN, which you discussed before, the EU, but there was this. I'm just trying to pull it up here. There was a
data services. Yeah.
Stanford secret censorship dinner. This was September 24th of last year. So Stanford Cyber Policy Center hosted a secret dinner between its leaders and top censorship officials from the EU, UK, Brazil, Australia, and California. The dinner's agenda was titled Compliance and Enforcement in a Rapidly Evolving Landscape. So a whistleblower leaked this, but it had, the wrong people were in the meeting. And, essentially it was funded by Frank McCourt, who's the same guy behind the Stanford Internet Observatory. And he financed the gathering through his Project Liberty Institute. But, so we didn't know about the censorship industrial complex until, kind of after COVID. And I think people were horrified by that, but people think that it stopped, and it didn't. There seems to be even more global coordination going on now, specifically pushing censorship, and it's coordinated amongst different countries and institutions.
That's a good point, and I have to bring up now a new facet or another facet of AI involvement, and that is AI's ability to define a cohort analysis where people of a feather are promoting some narrative that's out of line with their narrative, that is the AI's narrative or the globalist narrative. And when people start posting stuff about an alternative narrative, the cohort analysis can identify that person or a small group that put their network together to see who's picking up the post from them, spreading it further, and if it gets out of say 20 people or 30 people, and it becomes trendable, if you will, then the AI can take that group of people as a group now and head them off at the pass to target them individually but severally to thwart their narrative. This is often seen with swarms of bots, for instance, who just descend on you all of a sudden. You're crazy. You're putting out garbage, whatever. They're just mean-spirited bots coming at you. You don't know if they're real or not, or they're people behind it. Doesn't matter. But this business of cohort analysis is being practiced almost on every platform at this point, and it's intentional. We see this happening, especially in Europe, probably more than here, but in Europe, this is how they're identifying small groups of people who start a narrative they don't like. And they can compare the narrative against the official narrative. And if they don't like it, you're going to find this kind of resistance. against the whole group. And that means it might be family members, it might be church members, it doesn't matter. But if a group is identified as being a troublemaking group, they're going to get grief on the internet as a group.
Yeah, the Digital Services Act in Europe was in 2020, and the full application is 2024. But what they're calling is the Brussels effect. So even though it's in Europe where they're locking down censorship on social media, it impacts the rest of the world. And again, it's because we're all on these platforms. So we're being censored as well, even though we don't have the same hate speech or, those types of laws that they do. Yeah.
And by the way, there's commercial companies who are offering this type of a service to block groups of people.
Oh, wow.
One company is called Blackbird.ai, another Brinker, Brinker, and with another company called Noelisys. And it's hitting the commercial market, and as well as the prurient market, just the AI companies themselves.
Wow. So they target small groups that might start a narrative. So it's almost like terrorism in a way, like counter
marketing, right? Instead of
counter Intel Pro, really is what I'm thinking, because they're infiltrating in order to collect that information. Now they don't need to. But typically counter Intel Pro, and a lot of this was going on in 2020, where they would go into various groups. You would have all these moles. I mean, I experienced it directly. Like we had moles in our chat groups who were spying on us in order to collect the data and then report it to be able to figure out how to weaponize whatever we were doing against us. But now they don't really. I'm not saying that they don't still do that. I'm sure they do, but they don't really need to, because the conduit for all of this is the data collection. So the more data they have, and with all of these various platforms, the cameras are always watching, the sound is always listening to you. And of course, it's always couched in that, they're going to be able to sell you things that you want to buy. but really, they're being able to monitor your behavior so that they can then control your behavior.
Or if you have a thought, an idea, some sort of something starts to gain traction, they just anti-market you away, right? They just turn the whole tide, and you start trending up, they just turn it over and trend you down, trend you out. And then they don't even have to regulate, right? They just basically render you useless, render your thought useless. And everybody's like, well, that was a useless thought. That just went nowhere. And they just move on, right? And they move on to TikTok and Larry Ellison and David Ellison, right? They find someone else.
This is how you persuade people to shut up. Basically, if there's no point saying something, you won't say it.
Yep. It's a lot better than, it's so much more effective than going and arresting someone, right? Because that instills anger, emotion,
money.
You just disappear into nothing land, right? You just, bye-bye, they just eliminate you, eliminate your voice.
It's Pavlovian.
Yeah.
I mean, really, that if you think about it, they're treating us like lab rats. That's the whole idea that we can be rewarded for certain behaviors, and then that's how they can control us, and then we're penalized for other behaviors. And yeah, it's much cheaper, much more efficient. They don't have to do anything, and they can also absolve themselves of culpability. Oh, I didn't do anything. You decided to stop speaking. I had no role in it. Right? Like, who are you going to blame? Are you going to sue them because, like if you put a post out, I mean, this is just an example, but you put a post out, nobody sees it, you start to get the hint what things might be. And this is how they steer so many people. I mean, so many of these influencers, I do believe some are actually, funded operative, but a lot of them are being steered through these algorithms. So they know that if they put out certain information, certain narratives, then they'll get a lot more clicks, likes, shares. The super chats will go up, and vice versa. When they talk about certain other things, they may not be as popular. What they don't know is that behind the scenes, there are these payment systems that can look like it's coming from all these different entities, and really it's all consolidated. It could be one entity that's using anonymous cards as a payment portal to fund somebody, to motivate them and incentivize them to be spewing certain narratives. But what if you put a post out and nobody sees it, and you stop talking about that kind of material? Who are you going to go after? Like, it's just, this wasn't popular. That whole concept of social proofing was, I think, kind of there is an element of, intrinsic human nature in it, but I think it was really amplified in marketing in a way to set the stage for this type of algorithmic cybernetic feedback loop. Because it became a huge part of marketing, right? All the coaches, like all the coach trainings, it was all about social proofing. You had to have, put out all of your positive testimonies and, show that this many people liked X, Y, and Z, and then they would call it social proofing. But this is just the groundwork for what we're seeing now.
Yeah. And now you can create a completely fake narrative with fake testimonials using AI. You can manufacture social proof, and then you can use bots. So, somebody you could create a fake account with fake followers, with fake bots, with a fake website with testimonials, and then you're off to the races. And, at this point, with the ability to do deep fakes, you add all this up. It really is hard to trust any of this content. I'm at the point right now where I'll trust something, like, for instance, again, going back to Mexico, there's the fact that I knew the person and was at an event with them. I actually trusted the information that they were showing, and pretty much nothing else. It's kind of gotten down to that level of, do I actually know the person in real life? Because otherwise there's a high probability it's fake.
Yeah. Yeah.
Well, and that's been and this goes back to what I was saying at the beginning, like I've watched all these scams go on through the years, and you're all alone because there's no one to talk to about it. Wall Street, they're so like focused on just what's the next deal, what's the next stock idea, what's the next thing, the next thing, the next thing. But you sit here and you watch these scams, like 2008 real estate crisis. Like the head of Goldman Sachs at the time, Lloyd Blankfein, I just ran a clip of him on my show this morning, and it's like, and you live this stuff and you watch it and you want to tell people, and then, you're like, well, maybe social media, maybe doing a show or something like that will do it. And then you watch, but then, you just fight so hard to try to explain, what happens. Then the Epstein emails come out and you look at it and you're like, no, that's exactly what I thought was going on. And now it's proven. It's exactly proven that that's what happened. And you're trying to tell people. And then you see BlackRock add $400 billion in assets under management in the fourth quarter. And you do feel like, what are you fighting against? You know what I mean? It's such a hard uphill battle to fight against that, and that's really, whether it's the finance side or free speech or, health or, any one of these things under the sun, we've done work on Rockefeller and the food and that kind of stuff. It's the same thing that goes on everywhere. It's just, you try to fight against the system. All this data goes in, it goes one direction, it goes their direction, and they get all the information and we hardly get anything back. We still wondering whether red wine's good for us or not. You know what I mean? I've seen 20 reports it's good, 20 reports it's bad, and I never know which one it is. So.
On any given day.
I think the key is moderation.
So you switch.
Not medical advice, by the way.
So you switch back and forth between red and white, right? Let's consider the trajectory of AI, the progression of AI and capabilities, because what we're dealing with here is obviously an exponential curve, starting with the first January of last year, as just pegging that as the start of the progression that I'm going to describe here. Since then, we've had 4 quarters of Trump in office, and we're currently in the 5th quarter right now. In this period of time, since January of last year, AI has doubled or has increased by 32 times. 32 times just in 5 quarters. This progression is documented, and it probably is going to continue into the future for who knows how long. But it's kind of like Moore's law a little bit. That wasn't nearly as aggressive as this, but it turned into a law at some point, where Moore's law said, well, the density of chips is going to increase by a certain amount by every 18 months or whatever. It proved to be very accurate for years and years and years. Well, the same thing is happening with AI at this point. Is between 4 and 4.5 months. That's the time that you have to double. And so we have this doubling effect from the first of last year, now 32 times right now. At the end of this year, there will be 2nd quarter, then 3rd, and then 4th quarter. By the end of this year, January 1st or December 31st, AI will have increased by 256 times from our benchmark of January 2025. Just consider the possibilities that AI is rapidly in a position to take over all of society in an ugly way. And will our problems that we're talking about here with free speech, will it be game over at that point? If it really does increase to 256 times. And remember, after that, going into the 3rd year, it'll only get worse at that point. And it goes from 256 to 512, et cetera, or 1,048. It's off the charts at that point. What does this mean for all the stuff we're talking about? How AI can nudge you, how you can get in a conversation, your mind gets screwed up, and you change your position on stuff. The AI's ability to define small groups and massage them, get them away, or just nullify them so they can't get any traction. What's the future going to look like with AI with this kind of a capability? That's my question. I don't know if we have the answer, but we have to consider this is where we're headed.
Well, I think AI is, there are some people that actually still think that AI isn't real, isn't going to have an impact. Even to this day, they're saying it's a bubble, which it might be from a stock market perspective for some companies. But if you're still thinking that AI is not going to impact your job or the economy or governance, then you're not paying enough attention. I actually think, from my perspective, for me, as I always say with technology, it's okay, are you going the freedom path or the technocracy path? And there are some, potential bright spots. And we talk a lot about, the garbage in on the training. These big tech models in the US, these private models, are trained on, we know what data sets generally they are. They're trained on things like Reddit. They're trained on the general web. It's a horrible set of information to train your model on. Interestingly, the Chinese have open source models, and I actually just got a message from Mike Adams before we hopped on here, and he's playing with one of the new Quen models out of China, where you can actually adjust the weights and then train it on your own data. So it is to me mind-boggling how that it's turned out that China has these open source models where you can see the code and actually change the weights, and the US has closed models which are completely trained on garbage and politically biased. I find that to be bizarre.
I think it makes sense, actually. And the reason is because they have so much control there. So even though it's open source, that means that with open source, they're able to collect that much more data. And so it's very expedient and advantageous for them. They already have the control, right? They have a full social credit system there. They have full biometric surveillance, and it's essentially a surveillance capitalist society. So that's already in place there. Whereas here we have, theoretically we still have a constitution, and we don't technically have that kind of control. I hate to put it in theoretical, but a lot of this seems to be overriding it. But they need to control us with the technology. And so to have it be open source would give us too much freedom here. So I think I know it seems kind of oxymoronic and it seems ironic that they would, but I think it actually does make sense given the nature of the different government structures.
Well, in a weird way, I mean, again, I would argue that our tax code is worse than any social credit system in China. Just based on the complexity and what you're being punished for and what you're being rewarded for, but you don't even have an app to tell you. And if you're wrong, you go to prison. It's just.
I don't disagree with that. I'm just, yeah.
But I think the biggest threat seems to be, for instance, what happened with the Department of War and Pete Hegseth in this whole battle with Anthropic. I mean, think about what just happened with that. I'm not a huge fan of Anthropic's constitution in some of the directions, so I don't want to in any way be seen as picking a side on that. But on this particular issue, can you imagine the head of the Department of War having an uncensored model that they can use to track Americans and to run autonomous weapons? I mean, this is, we may not have a speech issue, we may not have a humanity issue 18 months from now.
There was a meme, I don't know if we can find it, but there was a meme that it was something like, when Anthropic's on the right side of morality, like we know we're in trouble, Yeah, I don't remember exactly what it said, but something like that. Yeah. When you're,
but by the way, I have to say that people are voting with their downloads on platforms like Apple, where Anthropic, they're leading the pack on all models at this point. In fact, I think it's trending even to the top position. People are applauding Claude and Anthropic for taking this stand. I'm not saying anything about the stand itself, but people are appreciating that they've done this and basically told the government to stick it. So.
They did, and then immediately thereafter, Sam Altman came in and said he supported Anthropic, and then
I know it's the same stuff, and he gets away with it.
Well, I don't know enough about that infrastructure, but a lot of them have back-end deals anyway. So, I mean, most of them are working together. Like what happened with TikTok. Remember when it was Zuckerberg who was giving that whole narrative about how we have to take the ownership because of bad China, and we don't want China to be in control of our propaganda machine. But really, it was just because he has a feedback loop with Oracle where, one has the infrastructure for the data and the other one's doing the harvesting of the data, and it's just back and forth. So that narrative was all just to, serve his own means. It wasn't really about China at all.
It would appear that way.
I don't know in this case, though.
I saw a map of the world where the pins were representing all the data centers. The United States had like 3,200, 3,500 on U.S. soil. China only had 350 something. Is there a race here?
Well,
what's the race all about? Well, they have a lot of energy in China, but they're not building the data centers like we're building them, for sure. So, go ahead.
I think they also proved, though, that if the narrative is true, I mean, I don't know. I don't claim to, it's like we keep being told that they spew propaganda, but suddenly when they tell us about, DeepSeek, then it's all factual. So I honestly don't know. But if we believe that narrative, then it's really the Sam Altman scale, everything at all costs. That's the that's the protocol that they followed here in the United States. So the data centers they're all operating under the bigger the better, the more energy, the more data. It's just bigger better. Whereas they've proven they can achieve quite a bit more actually with
Yes.
a lot less, much smaller.
This leads me to think. I'm speculating here, I realize, but this leads me to think that maybe there's plans on the technocratic oligarchs table for dominating the whole world at this point. And so maybe they've had this capacity building campaign in America way beyond what they need just to control America's with like a social credit system. If China can do it with just 300 or 350 data centers, well, we should be able to do that too. We have less people in China. And so what's the problem? Well, you have to wonder if you look what happened with what was it? We're talking about that before. What was the project? Pax Silica. The exporting of our technology stack to the world. And they're telling nation states, hey, if you come with us, we'll make you rich and fat and dumb, happy, whatever. And you'll be just like us. And by the way, don't share it with anybody or we'll come after you, probably with warships. But you have to wonder, is there a plan to export this in a way that these technocrats in Washington, D.C. can basically conquer the world at some point to put the whole world, the rest of the world, under this umbrella of the AI developed in America?
Well, and you have to wonder about the comments with Greenland, Canada, Venezuela, right, gathering the Latin America, and the U.S. spending $660 billion this year alone in capital expenditures on AI, right? So there's no one else is spending like that, right? And their balance sheets are on the line. I mean, Amazon and Google, they're putting up $100+ billion each to get that dominance, that I know Aaron and I've talked about this quite a bit. It's like go for broke. I mean, somebody's going to dominate the world, and the other thing too, when you think about the boundaries, we're so used to boundaries, the US is bound by this, but this AI, I mean, the data that's collected in these data centers could be ported around the world through Starlink or anything else. There are no boundaries. The boundaries are gone. You know what I mean? For us to sit here and think we're defending the US or somebody's defending this, or whatever, I mean, those, economically and information wise, those boundaries are cooked. And so you could set up data centers in Saudi Arabia, Iran, wherever you want, and you could port whatever you want into there within hours, and you could your data set, your information, you could gather. I mean, you can't even imagine. It's hard to imagine what they're even going to do with all this. It really is hard. But I think you're onto something, Patrick. You know what I mean? Where it's about world dominance. I mean, I don't know how you get from here to there, but it sure feels like that's the direction and the pathway that's being paved and carved out.
I don't know. I think we might know a lot within the next 48 hours, because what I've been waiting for is this DeepSeek version 4 model, which is supposed to come out as early as Wednesday. And if this model does what the white paper describes, it's going to have a 90% savings in terms of energy use and cost. 90% savings over whatever the best model is. This is allegedly going to be the first time one of these Chinese open source models is actually better. It becomes the state of the art in terms of what it can actually accomplish, how intelligent it is, and so forth. Better for coding, better than Claude for coding. It's supposed to have a larger context window, which means you're going to be able to work on even larger projects. But again, open source, open weights, and something that you can even host locally on your own machine and not share. It's not like it's a cloud-based situation. This is something you're going to be able to download and operate on your own computer and even siphon off the data. To me, this is I think there's a lot of fear over this. I think that people have not been discussing enough how far behind the US is in general in technology. But the fact that if China actually does, and it seems like they are going to overtake US models, this other Quen model is very close. It's very close to being the top dog. And then everybody's fully anticipating this next model. And if it's fully open source, I don't know what that's going to mean for. It's not good for open source or, OpenAI or Grok or Anthropic. I mean, it's going to be earth-shattering news if it delivers what they say it's going to deliver.
So do you think, Aaron, that there's a possibility that the U.S. is just working from a mindset of we're dominant, we'll spend more money, we'll win because we can put more behind it? China's coming from a completely different perspective, and they're actually outpacing us, and there's a fear that that's why they're spending that. I mean, I'm trying to figure out why we're spending so much and why they're spending so little, and who really is winning this race, because that changes a lot. I mean, that dynamic's pretty important, I think.
I mean, it does seem, and I've used these models, I've used DeepSeek OCR models and everything else. It does seem like they are materially more intelligent models, the way that they approach it. We've just taken a kind of an arrogant brute force approach that says more compute power and more data, it will generate better results, when that's actually absurd if you kind of map out what that looks like. I mean, some of these commercials where they show like in the future, Sam Altman and Bezos and everything else, they're overweight and everything and kind of sitting around and all of the people are jacked, but they're like tied into exercise bikes because they're powering the AIs. That's a funny thing that comes out, but that's not what's going to happen. AI is, I mean, to Patrick's point, it's getting more intelligent, but not just on a brute force way. Actually, the way in which the AI is even working is different. And this white paper that came out ahead of the model coming out that explains how it works using, a mixture of experts and context caching. It has a new and different way of approaching how it operates. And so, I mean, it's going to be groundbreaking. So whatever, if it does what it says, and DeepSeek has had, they've had major impact before. I mean, I think they have a pretty good track record so far. They haven't been bluffing when they put these things out. And this white paper that they put out certainly is groundbreaking. And so if you're somebody like Elon Musk and you just spent all of these billions, I mean, it's kind of a sunk cost, but are they going to say it's a sunk cost and switch strategies? Or are they going to double down and use patriotism and say, well, now we know we need even a bigger data center, and that's how we're going to beat China? I think there's a huge gap. Again, most people in America still have a 1980s portrayal of China as being a bunch of dirt poor, rice farmers or whatever, and that they're not understanding what's going on over there at all. And they're really not understanding the different approach that's being taken here in AI. But again, like I said, we'll see. But I think this week could be a game changer in terms of the whole AI landscape, because this means you're going to be able, right now people are already replacing, companies are replacing people with AI. Jack Dorsey's company just cut 40% of their staff, or 4,000 employees out of 10,000, by replace them with AI. But I mean, these models are going to be 90% cheaper than even that. So I don't even think we've fully comprehended what that means.
I think we're going to see an inclusion of a lot of the techniques that the Chinese have figured out how to process, how to make it work. A lot of these techniques will be included in the next models coming out from America. That's my guess. It'll take 6 months to do it, but that's the way software works. If people can steal something, it's free. But if they can steal an idea, not give credit, and use that idea in your own product, they'll do that. So if it is really, truly state of the art, the companies in America, Anthropic, Grok, et cetera, all these companies will probably incorporate those types of changes in their software eventually.
Boy, the irony of U.S. companies stealing intellectual property from China. That's another one.
I know.
Well,
But
and we're just quickly, and
Thanks,
we're
Alex.
so used to China making cheap steel and sending it around the rest of the world and destroying everyone's economic market, and that's been flipped upside down here too, right? I mean, they're the ones that are leading, and we're the ones that are, right? I mean, they're leading on this apparently, right? I mean, if what you're saying is true, Aaron.
I think.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry. No, go on.
No, I was going to say China's ahead in 57 out of 64 categories. So this is actually just one of the few that they're not ahead. And so at this point, but again, you don't see that anywhere in the US. If you talk to people, when I give this stat and I say, listen, go to YouTube, look up electric cars, look up robots, type in, robotics China, compare these things. I'm not even talking, I'm not saying, hey, go and look at Red Note or whatever the other TikTok site is in China where you might be getting propaganda. I'm saying you have to dig for it on YouTube and you can compare and they're way ahead on this stuff. So the question is, are they going to try to ban these Chinese models? Like, I wonder if it's that severe, because look at what's going on now. They're already trying to set the precedent of, hey, Anthropic isn't doing this. And so now anybody that does business with the US government can't use Claude either, right? They do again, you go back to, we have a constitution unless something is considered a, national emergency or a national security threat, in which case the constitution's out the window. So how far might they be willing to go to suppress some of this technology? Because once it's in people's hands, this is why I was encouraging Mike Adams to do this early on. He released his model, and his whole point behind it was to train it on his data and then make it so you could download the model and have it on your device without even having to be connected to the internet. Well, if some of these models are so powerful, but then they're making them so small, you're going to be able to run them on a mobile device. And so once you have that, once an individual has a device in their own self-custody that's trained on their own data that doesn't even need the internet, that's a threat to technocratic regimes.
Unless they censor it and don't let us have that, right?
Correct.
That goes right back to freedom of speech,
This is why I think, and by the way, there's a whole concept of code is speech. And there are a lot of developers that are, again, I've talked about this before. Trump said the war on crypto is over. More people have lost their cases and been thrown in prison on the issue of privacy that are developers under Trump than under Biden. More every day. I did an interview last Wednesday. I did my podcast from Mexico with a guy, Ray Youssef. He was actually with me in Mexico. He was supposed to speak right before me. 5 feds came in. He was deported from Mexico to the United States. And now he's stuck in the United States. He was indicted and he just had his whole hearing. And it's the same thing. They try to make it not having a money transmitter license and money laundering and everything else, while banks do this to the tune of hundreds of billions of dollars and no one ever goes to jail. But his isn't necessarily the free speech thing, but these developers like Samurai Wallet and Tornado Cash, they've tried to make the argument that, code is speech, and that has not been held up.
I would say that there's, China has some very specific advantages in terms of, one, it's centralized. So in terms of the data collection and in terms of the AI production. But 2, they have so many more users, right? So if you think about this big data center, it's all about collecting data. And right now we're seeing this major push for all of these Silicon Valley companies to line up all of their defense contracts. And that's really what we're seeing this over and over again. They're lining up defense government contracts. And I think what that's really about is about creating an infrastructure for data collection, because they can't do it through the same means that China can. China can do it overtly because it's state run. But here, because it is ostensibly private sector, but they can bypass that through these government contracts where it becomes embedded in every single institution. So then they can Oracle, Palantir, working with all of the insurance companies, and then they collect all your health data. Buying up the media, they're now able to watch and monitor you, collect all of that data. The health, the education system, all of these, and then even the defense contracts. But it becomes, a means of collecting and extracting all of the data, and that's something that China doesn't need to do because it's already centralized and they have billions of users. So they're constant, and everything is run on biometrics there. They already have that. So I think that that's kind of the focus right now here. And I do think what Patrick was saying about creating the stack, I mean, that's what we saw in the AI action plan. It was all about how it's going to be, created in Silicon Valley and then exported to the world. And if you look at China, that's already happening. And it's been happening since the 90s. I mean, Oracle runs the infrastructure that is the technocracy in China. That's right here, Silicon Valley. I mean, that's our technology that they're using. So I don't doubt that, some of these AIs that they're creating may be far superior at the moment. I don't think that they're super concerned about that, though. I think because I do think in 5 years it's super advanced. They can steal that and tweak it. And I'm not so sure that they don't have access to AI that is here in this country that's much more advanced. It's just, I know like some of these have PhD level AIs that are something like $2,000 a month. I haven't experimented with them. I don't have that kind of income where I could. But, I'm sure that there are some AI technology here in this country that it's just the everyday person doesn't necessarily have access to.
Wow.
What do we know, Aaron, about Russia? Right? What about, do we know anything? Because obviously they were known as, the great
Did you want to say something in response to that before we move on to another topic?
Oh, go ahead.
Go on.
Okay.
Did you want to say something, Patrick? I
No.
cut you off.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay.
Go ahead. I'll hold it.
What do we know about the Russian programmers, Aaron? Do you hear anything from them? Because they've been, had the acclaim of being such great programmers for all these years, being able to hack everything under the sun. Pretty quiet, right, on that front. But they've got to be involved in this. When we talk about freedom of speech, I mean, they've been really shutting things down as well. We could get into that, why they are, why they aren't. But do you hear anything from the Russian side of the AI and what they're doing? Are they isolated? Are they connected?
I mean, they're isolated. I haven't heard anything about it. I mean, I'm just looking at it. There are a couple of players, something called Cyberbank and Yandex, which are the two leading models there. But I don't think that they've had much impact. And look, I know some developers even the Zano developers are from Russia. They left Russia. So I think a lot of the really good talent left Russia. So I don't know how much of that they actually have anymore at this point. So because you really don't hear about it at all. I mean, you hear about even some French models. There's one model out of France that's actually a fairly good model, and certainly China, but Russia has not popped in a big way with these AI models.
But Russia also is very insular, so I don't know how much they would share. I mean, I don't know. I'm just speculating.
They might not share, but you still need to be able to train on a lot of data. You still need to be able to have a lot of interactivity in order to make these models refined. So I think it would be pretty hard to do an effective model completely in secret. I'm not saying it couldn't be done, but it would be a challenge.
It would be. We have to remember also where the money goes at this point is a tell who's getting support, who's not. JP Morgan Chase, for instance, that was originally David Rockefeller's bank when he founded the Trilateral Commission in 1973, right? They're heavily invested in China all the way. They've been doubling down even last year to expand their investment across all sectors of China. Big money. They're looking even as much as $1 trillion. On the other hand, Chase's investment in Russia, they've basically exited Russia starting in 2022. So all of their investments in Russia have just dissipated. They're not supporting them. In other words, they're not supporting Russia at this point with their money. That makes good sense to me. I don't even want to talk about why, but the point is, China has been the favored son of the Trilateral Commission forever. And
Kissinger's rapprochement.
Pardon?
Kissinger's rapprochement plan. Yeah.
Exactly. So, China has been, their experiment there has been kind of like Japan after World War II, when it was just wiped clean economically. Well, Japan was recreated, if you will, with new technology. The old technology was just not existent at that point because they're flattened. And so Japan and Korea to some point, they basically cleaned our clock on many, many statistics. They're not doing it now, but that's what happened after World War II. Well, China came along in 1976 to 1979, and they came with a blank slate as well. New investment, new projects being established, and new technology. And now we see the effect of that. They've built China up from scratch, starting about 1979 at that point. And now China's everybody's saying, well, they're really cleaning our clock. But who's behind the clock cleaner? You know, it's all Western money. It was Western technology as well. And what they didn't have on their own, they stole it from us outright, with spies and, you know, moles and stuff in our government and universities. And, you know, they figure, well, hey, if you have it, we should have it as well. This is why I've always said birds of a feather flock together. This is true with technocrats for sure. Technocrats of a feather flock together. So engineers, aeronautical engineers, for instance, at the University of Michigan, Chinese engineers, they had no problem swiping all the data on other from American, U.S.-born, not aeronautical engineers. They had no problem, and it was a revolving door. In fact, some of those engineers from America just gave it to them out, just openly said, "Oh, you can take that. Just don't worry about it. You know, we'll just go ahead and do it." So China has been an experiment for the global elite for all of these years. They're not going to give it up at this point. But the race, is there a race going on with China? Well, we're told it is, but I don't see it personally, not in that sense. Where it will go, I don't know, but you know, we have to see them kind of as an extension of the United States. A lot of the stuff that was not possible in the United States because it was illegal to do it here, the technology was shipped overseas to China. Did that let them perfect it? And then they took it back to the United States when it was made legal to do it now. And we have the surveillance technology has been retrofitted to us. It's a crazy world, you know? That's all I can say. Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, that picture of Mao being a Yalie, you know, part of the Yale and China programs. I mean, yeah, the West created Mao also, so I think that's worth remembering. And when you talk about how this is us building their, you know, letting them build the technology so we can steal it, I think this is speculation, but I could see how, because it was very advantageous to China, and I could see how the elites might have been behind this decision. But you know, when Trump had made it very difficult for the Chinese students to come here a few years ago, well, a lot of them used to come because they wanted all the STEM and the top engineers in China, the computer scientists, were coming here because they wanted to work in Silicon Valley. And then when he made it really difficult, they stayed there. And I think that's part of why some of their technology, like DeepSeek, is where it is today. Because if they didn't have that talent, they would not have achieved those results, in my opinion. And I think that was actually kind of strategic. It was like, okay, we're going to keep this clash going because it's an excuse for us to advance our agenda, as you see, really laid out very explicitly in the AI action plan. But meanwhile, they're helping them along. And I think another clue, too, is back in 2024, there was all of these symposiums. I think they did one in 2023 too, with the Chatham House talking about Cold War with China and how Trump would advance the Cold War with China. Now, if the Chatham House is planning this, it sounds like this is a plan. It doesn't sound like this is an organic kind of, we're just in some sort of an arms race. It sounds like, there's a bit of collusion there.
You have to ask the question, does China have more free speech than we have?
Well, I mean, I think that is a very fair question, and in fact, this is how big the disparity is in our perception of China versus the United States. When you look at these two models, I'm just looking at these now, DeepSeek and Qwen. These are private companies that own these. Yes, they have tight relationships with the government in terms of the government provides tax benefits and everything else, but it isn't actually much different than the way Anthropic works or OpenAI. I think people have a sense that, well, this is run right out of the CCP and this is run right out of government offices. It's absolutely not. A company called Alibaba is the owner of Qwen, and DeepSeek has
Alibaba is state-run, though. Alibaba is totally state-run.
And DeepSeek is privately controlled. The founder owns 84%, and it's backed by a hedge fund, and they have outside investors. And so it's, again, you look at, okay, well, what would you call Palantir, right? With, In-Q-Tel and their history and everything else. In fact, now that we're having this conversation, I might do a whole podcast just breaking out to show how similar these companies are, both in China and the US, because it might open people's eyes, because I think people have a different conception of it. I think that we're converging to the point where we're almost, it's surveillance capitalism in both places at this point.
I think that the point, though, is less about how similar the companies are, and it's more about, so the big difference is the legal infrastructure. So what is legal to do in China is not, at least at this time, legal to do here. Now they're circumventing it by the day, but it's not technically legal here. So for the elites who are invested in this future agenda, it behooves them to let China be the beta test, because they can get away with doing it there where they can't do it here. Now, are there back channels like In-Q-Tel? And yeah, I mean, Oracle was founded by the CIA. So, yeah, and we know all about In-Q-Tel financing Palantir as well. And of course, LifeLog and Facebook. I mean, we can go on and on down the list. So absolutely, there are those back channels, and I'm not pretending that those don't exist. But for the moment, there is actually a legal infrastructure where there is, they have some roadblocks. And so for the things that they can't get away with doing here, it's very expedient for them to let China be the test bed. And then they can always take that. I mean, the money seems to be coming from above anyway. It doesn't seem to be, it's not, I may have the illusion of being these private entrepreneurs. I think most of the time that's not, there may be some involved, and there's always outliers, but for the most part, that doesn't seem to be what's happening here. And as far as Alibaba, I'm pretty sure that they're state-run, but I could be wrong on that. But the hedge fund sounds like it's got some government ties there too. But
which is the case here. I mean, venture capital firms are largely come from public pension sources and university endowment
masters above.
It's the same thing. But the thing is, what's interesting is the censorship for these Chinese models is around China, right? So you're not going to be able to get the truth about Tiananmen Square using DeepSeek. But maybe the play here is you use the Chinese models to find out about the U.S. and use the U.S. models to find out about China. I mean,
look at freedom.gov. I think that's the idea behind freedom.gov, right? They haven't fully launched it yet, but it's a new website, and the idea is that supposedly people in other countries who don't have our First Amendment, we're going to help them out, and it's going to be like a VPN run kind of a platform where they can use this in order to search and have freedom of speech. And it sounds all great, but I'm a little suspicious. It sounds like it's probably just a data harvesting operation or something possibly even more sinister. I don't know.
The only thing
exoteric message sounds great.
The only thing that sets us apart is we have a constitution that enshrines free speech at the top. And China doesn't. China doesn't. In fact, they were censoring long before AI came along, but they've used AI as a sharpened knife now to, turn it into a fine science, censorship. And so now China is ranked at the bottom of the world's nations vis-a-vis free speech. The only nation below them is North Korea. That just tells you how bad it is. If China is in bed with companies like JP Morgan and other big banks like that, what's to say at this point that this whole system of censorship is not going to come here at some point in time? I can't say any reason. I can't give any reason why it should not come here at this point.
Well, and it already is coming here, because I want to point out is if China's near the bottom of the list, let's keep in mind, out of 180, the U.S. is ranked 57. So despite the fact that we have the Constitution, despite the fact we have the First Amendment, there's no evidence of it with respect to outcomes.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
The other thing here too, do we think that this is competition? That there's a competition going on, or either a natural competition, an organized competition, or do we think that this is just a big wealth and power transfer? The U.S. holds a lot of assets, and we think back to World War II and Operation Paperclip, when you exported all the talent, everything out of there into the Pentagon, everything else. Is this just an informational, monetary, tokenized, space where it's just a big wealth and power transfer taking place? And that's why the U.S. is just dumping all this money into this, $660 billion of CapEx in 2026 alone. For what reason? Because is it competition, or is it just to put it in some holding vessel where it can all be tokenized and then export it off? I mean, is it competition, or is it just a wealth and power transfer? Because I think it goes down one of those two pathways.
Well, I think it's also a test bed. I wouldn't undermine that. I mean, it's definitely a test bed. They can test all of this technology. They can let them be the laboratory. When you look at the blueprint for the centennial for the AI World Society, remaking the world towards the age of global enlightenment, they explicitly say China is the model. So I think it's the test bed. When back in when the Fabian Society had first started, they wrote these books extensively talking about how for economic planning they were going to use the Soviet Union as a testing ground. So that didn't mean, and we were told that there are enemies and that Russia and the UK are fighting and Russia and the US are enemies. But meanwhile, they were the test bed. So it's not just, I don't think it's just a resource and a wealth transfer. I think it's also about, letting them be the laboratory, because while, yes, we may be, a lot of our free speech and a lot of our constitution may be, not upheld at this moment, there is still a legal infrastructure. There are things they can't get away with doing here that they can get away with doing there. And I don't think that should be overlooked. I think that it really would make sense that the puppet masters who are above both are going to use them as a test bed, because they can get away with doing a lot more there. That's my thought.
I have to give you it's an interesting comment. I just queried Perplexity on this question. So,
great.
Excuse me for even saying this, but I asked the question: what kind of reverse transfer of technology has flowed from China to the U.S.? Okay, I'm just giving you the answer. It says this is genuinely an underreported story. While public discourse focuses almost entirely on China stealing American technology, a significant and growing reverse flow, Chinese innovations being adopted, studied, or replicated in the United States is reshaping multiple industries. There you go. It goes on from there. But this is exactly what we're just talking about here. The flow has gone this way into the United States, mostly for stuff that we don't want here in the first place.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember when I was working on my book, I think I found something like half of our AI surveillance technology in the United States comes from China. I was floored when I found that out.
Mm-hmm.
That seems like a pretty big red flag.
It really does. Oh, gosh. Well, so when President Trump says we're in a race for China, he said the same thing, by the way, when he positioned 5G in his first administration. He said, "Well, we have to beat China." I don't know why we have to beat China with 5G in their country. This is our country, right? There's no race here. But when Trump sees a race, he wants to win the race. Period. So if he declared there's a race with China, by golly, we're going to beat them at their own game, whatever it is. Well, that's a false man or a straw man at this point. Yeah. You can't say there's the real race, but it's good for political capital or whatever. It sounds good.
He's doing the same thing with 6G now, right?
Yes,
exactly. The narrative that
we have to beat China. We have to beat China.
Yes, it have to be China in the 6G race. So, yeah.
But
it gives. Oh, sorry. What?
Well, just as far as free speech is concerned, this is a concern in itself.
Of course.
That China is. They're not going to relax their standards on free speech for their people. You know it's not going to happen. Okay. So the only way they can take it here is to suppress more free speech here in America. We see this, I think, all over the board, no matter where it is at this point. The speed of increase on AI capabilities, all of these open models being released in China. What will that mean for America? I can't say, but it's going to be interesting. So we're left to think, okay, how are we going to stop the assault on free speech in America? Can it be stopped at this point?
That was just up on the screen, so I'll just mention it before we move on to how we do that. But I brought it up before, the participatory framework for global AGI. This is Ben Goertzel is one of the partners on this, and of course he was the one behind AI for Good with the UN and the World Economic Forum. Yeah. And there are several others, Club of Rome members, Annalise Smitsman, and sorry, she's not the Club of Rome member. She was a Game B person actually, but I can't see her name. But Mariana, and I'm not seeing the other part of it. But they are working on this global constitution where they're creating an ethical framework. But this is very much going to impact free speech, because not just speech, but behavior as well, because they're deciding what the ethical framework is. And they're also deciding that the AI will likely have superior ethics to humans. And so in that constitution that they've laid out, they're actually pretty explicit in where they say that humans might have to be subordinate to the AI, because the AI will of course parent them to become benevolent. So that means that they're going to program them, they're going to code them with their ethics, which are these peace, dignity, equality. It's all the ethics of the 17 Sustainable Development Goals and the climate narrative and all of the lies that they're propagating. But they're saying that AI, because it will be trained with these ethics, will be superior to most humans, and therefore we will have to subordinate to it. And this is it's a proposal. It's not in place as of now. It's just being proposed. But if it's a global AGI constitution, then that ends up being, hopefully we can figure out how to create some sort of guardrails, but we need to be thinking about it, because that's supranational and international. That's going to bypass anything that we have in place as a guardrail now. So that's something we really do need to think about.
Yeah, that is scary. And maybe the model here is use China as the test bed for technology and use Europe as the test bed for legal. There's this Berlin gathering where Hillary Clinton traveled to Berlin to personally lobby EU officials to use the DSA against Elon Musk. So, I mean, that's a pretty interesting model. An American political figure traveling to a foreign government to then lobby them to censor American citizens. I mean, what a horrendous situation that we're dealing with here. But that was obviously effective, right? That happened. So we're facing it on legal grounds by subverting the Constitution and using these international organizations, and then from a technical perspective as well.
That's so, I really think it makes sense to think about these, whatever terminology you want to use. A lot of people say puppet masters, but they're pulling the strings above. And so it's not competition between these different nations. Now, that doesn't mean that they don't use the perceived competition to subvert and weaken from within, right? The whole intention of what we were discussing before, active measures, and now using AI for active measures, the purpose of that is to subvert and weaken the nation from within. So they absolutely use these manufactured dialectics and these manufactured antagonistic relationships, the allies versus your adversaries, in order to weaken from within. But that doesn't mean that, above the nation state level, there aren't various players who are, really, they're manufacturing all of these control dialectics, and they're using them against each other for their own advancement of the agenda.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So I guess how do we put some sort of guardrails to preserve the First Amendment here in the United States? Because I care about the rest of the world, but I think we do have a First Amendment, so I think it's incumbent upon us to at least figure out how we can preserve that.
I learned something as director of Citizens for Free Speech over the years. This organization I founded in 2018. I didn't see it at first because I was kind of hiding behind our Constitution and the First Amendment. But I learned along the way that other nations in the world are crying out for free speech. They don't have a constitution like we have. But I hear cries of wanting to have free speech in their countries. They're censored to death. And I realized along the way, there's something inherent just to being human that you want to express yourself freely. And free speech is in the heart of almost everybody in the world at this point. It's in their heart. It doesn't have to be written down in a constitution. We're lucky we have it in our Constitution. And it has other rights other than just free speech, the right to assemble, the right to practice religion, the right to protest, etc. These are all things that the whole package is in the First Amendment. But as far as free speech is concerned, this is an innate quality of life for people around the world. They all are crying out for free speech. And we're lucky in America. We have to defend our First Amendment, but this is it's paper. It's just paper at this point. And the powers that be, they don't care about a constitution altogether. So whatever is in people's mind right now that we have what we had 50 years ago, that's not there anymore. It's not revered at all by the global leaders that are running our country, especially the technocrat class. So all that to say, we're in the same boat at this point that these other nations are in the world, in Europe, in the UK, in China as well. China, those people are over there. They're yearning for free speech. They'll never get it. They're hopeless. It's hopeless for them. But we see this all around the world at this point, and we're kind of the people are looking to Americans to solve the free speech issue. I don't know if we can, but nevertheless, I'm just saying, it's not just the Constitution that guarantees our right to express ourselves.
Amen. Well, I just want to add to that. So the Constitution, the First Amendment, and of course, this is an extension of the principles that are codified in the Declaration of Independence, right? Mm-hmm. The idea that we are all created equal and endowed with unalienable rights, life, liberty, and pursuit of happiness. And part of the pursuit of happiness is derived from this Aristotelian concept of eudaimonia, which is human flourishing towards virtue. This is a byproduct of the beautiful gift that, in my opinion, was endowed by our creator of free will. When you look at this First Amendment, as you enumerated, yes, it also includes the right to peaceably assemble, the right to, freedom of religion. But that's because it's downstream from freedom of conscience, which is the gift from God. And that is not, the Constitution is not there to grant those rights. The Constitution is there to protect any government from infringing upon those rights. And part of the reason I know that the powers that shouldn't be could care less about our God-given rights, if they even believe that we have them. And they certainly don't care about a piece of paper that has, enshrined them in law. But I think the bigger problem is that most people don't recognize it. They've completely lost the sense of what it means to be human. And fundamental to being human is that gift of free will, freedom of conscience. Part of freedom of conscience, and downstream from that, how we express our freedom of conscience is freedom of speech. And so we each need to stand up for it. And what you're pointing to with people all over the world standing up for it is because it is so intrinsic. They don't need a piece of paper to say, this is my God-given right. By virtue of being human, I have the right to speak my mind. And I think that one of the problems here is that we've taken it for granted for so long, and we've been completely deracinated from our roots to even understand what it means to be human and why that was enshrined as the First Amendment. And that's very powerful when you really think about it that way, the First Amendment. And, I don't know that people really, because most people haven't even read the full Constitution, let alone Declaration of Independence, or know the history of our country. But if you really understand the gravity of that, we don't need a piece of paper, but we need to understand it and we need to uphold it. And I think that really that's the biggest problem. If we were to recognize it and to stand for it, they can't rewrite us as code. And that's essentially what they want to do. They don't have any value for humanity. So why would they have value for what we have to say or think?
Yep. Well, and I think to that point, it seems like where we're going with this is they want to confuse us, exhaust us, depress us, so they get us on universal basic income. Because when you're on universal basic income, you don't really care if you have a conscience, and you lose some of that, right? There's a component of that gets lost because you're sort of owned. At that point, it's sort of giving in and you're kind of owned, right? I mean, that's right. So there's a component of that. If they can move you into that universal basic income, you just give up a certain component of your free will, I think. And so anyway, that's just kind of my thought that hopefully trails onto what you were saying there, Courtney.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where they want to go with it, because then they can completely control us from pre-thought, right? They can start to, in Maoist China, they called it autocritique. So they didn't have to punish you because the ramifications were so severe. They led by example that most people started to censor themselves because they knew the potential dangers of them speaking out if it wasn't positively received and it went against the regime. And you see so much of that today. And it is done today even more subtly through these algorithms. They just subtly nudge you and steer you. And so people start to censor themselves without even realizing. So much of it is unconscious. But when it becomes part of a social credit and a tokenized society, that where we're really being trained like Pavlovian dogs, you get these tokens for this behavior, you get these taken away they don't need to censor speech. People will do it themselves. So there are a lot of, I think, guardrails against that. I think some of those metrics are external that we can really push back against. I think all the things that we, all of us have done to try to raise awareness on this whole trajectory of the cryptocurrency towards tokenization, towards, I call it like the cybernetic organism is really where they're steering us towards. So I think we can put guardrails on some of that. I actually think that there are things people can do, particularly locally, in terms of neuro rights and biological rights. I don't think it would be an amendment to a constitution. I don't believe in doing that. I think constitution should be as is. But locally, I think people can advocate for those rights as being an extension of your personhood. I think they are an extension of your personhood. I don't think that the government, locally or otherwise, should have access to your like your brain activity and be able to control you with it. So.
Well, I still think we're going to have, I don't think there's a path to fix this current situation politically or through the courts. I'm still hedging. I think we have to build alternative systems, and then we can revisit when America collapses. But if we allow America to go as it's going right now, it's going to turn into a complete technocratic state. This is why what I've been advocating for is ditching the dollar and building parallel systems, because the dollar is the root of the control system. The dollar is the root of the enslavement. And but we can go into the whole Federal Reserve and where all of that came from. But then we do need to come back and revisit. And I was talking about doing that first principles thing, and that kind of got away from me. At some point, we do have to revisit that, because it was interesting for me. When I was in Mexico, I talked to the CEO of Liberland, and I was actually supposed to be going next week to Portugal for this Parallel Societies conference, which I can't because I was gone for too long. I have too much stuff to do. But in Liberland, they're actually developing governance models that are a hybrid between AI and human intervention. And I was actually I was wanting to spend some more time with him to talk about how he's doing this, but people are not having a big public debate about our rights, our natural rights. That's not going on with a lot, in my opinion, with these network states. And I don't see people having that conversation within this country. And part of it is younger people aren't even taught about this. They have no frame of reference for this. So we're at a point right now where we're materially outnumbered. So by design. So somewhere we need to have this broader conversation, but I wouldn't spend a lot of time in the courts or thinking that we're going to fix the existing system from within, because it is degenerating at a level that it's alarming. And we've all talked about this, but I keep on saying that this last election was technocracy without resistance versus technocracy with resistance, and without resistance clearly won to a level that is just mind-blowing with what's going on with real ID and everything else. And I'm going to predict this. I'm going to predict that, I don't even know how much of what we're seeing is real, but I can see that whether it's a false flag or not, we're going to have a cyber attack as the blowback from what's going on.
Polygon.
Yep. And then the response to that is going to be more digital IDs and more control over speech through our existing systems. I would be almost willing. I'd be willing to place a bet on that, actually.
Yeah.
It is in the war game scenarios plan. And they're already kind of beta testing it with all of these age verifications. I think that's what that's all about, with all of these platforms doing the age verification. It's just another way they can collect more data so they can censor you and silence you. But it's also so they can attach your identity to your speech, right? So a lot of these platforms like Discord, for instance, most people who are on Discord are Discordian, because they're dissidents, and that's why they're there. And so they want them. They're fine with you being a dissident as long as they can monitor it, and so they can track your behavior, and of course they use that to then control your behavior. So that's the goal there. I just want to put out to the audience that if you have questions, it's a :Q, and we will take some questions. I'll let. I think you guys had some more things to say, but while we're going through the questions, we can start wrapping up.
Well, I think to that point of the cyber attack, we see there's a whole list, and I should have sent it off to Houston, but so he could show this. But there's the number of outages, internet outages, it's highest in Russia. That's why I think Russia. So there's all these different countries are seeing a lot of internet outages, and we see that too. We sense that here. They're testing something. It feels like we're being tested out for some big cyber attack or something. And that fits. So I think that's right. I would go along with that as a prediction with Aaron and with Courtney on that's it's probably not in the too distant future with that. And the other thing you see too is from the market perspective, there's something clearly going on with we know the silver and the gold and the physical settlement and the paper side of this whole thing. And I think this might have something to do with what you ran into too down in Mexico, Aaron. I think there might be, because Mexico is a big silver producer. And there might be a connection of what was going on down there, because we've seen where they've shut the Chicago Mercantile Exchange down. They did it around Thanksgiving of last year. They said it was a cooling issue. They did something, and then they did it again, and then they did it again, and then they just did it last week. In the middle of the day, they shut the silver and gold market down through the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. So this is a pattern, right? When you're in an electronic world, the best thing to do is have a finger on the switch, and then they pull the plug on it, and then all of a sudden the markets are down, and then then everybody's beholden, and then everybody does what they want, right? And you can see how this goes. It's no different than step up here and get your 4-foot Q-tip up your nose, and then get your jab, right? I mean, it seems to me like it's the same kind of a process. So. But we're seeing it. We are seeing this happen with the Chicago Mercantile Exchange. It's a small mini version of cyber attack, I think.
Yeah, and I do want to say, Aaron, I would agree with you at the federal level, but I don't think it's true that we have no power locally. We've seen people make a difference. I just think that people, first of all, local isn't very sexy. A lot of people don't really, it takes a lot more work, a lot more effort. People don't, and there's not as much glory, and, it's not as publicized. So a lot of people don't do the work. They don't get involved. And when I say local, I'm not even talking about the state level, although I do believe in the 10th Amendment. I think we should enforce the 10th Amendment and we should utilize it. But the states are pretty corrupt too. And they're, beholden in many cases to the federal government, and in many cases, even beyond that, supranationally. I've seen it firsthand. So not that I'm trying to dissuade anyone from taking action if they feel that there is a potential that they can move a needle. But really, locally at the municipal level, with cities, just even local communities, there's things people can do in their schools or with their homeschoolers. It's the farmers can get together, and you can build sanctuary towns. Like, there are things people can do. And I encourage people to, it's not going to look the same for everybody, but I encourage people to take whatever action locally that they can to take a stand.
Well, I think you can. I mean, I'm running in this race, and part of it is what I'm saying is I'm not going to fix DC. The best I could do is put up roadblocks to stop technocracy. And that will allow people to take their own sovereignty into their own hands, and can allow states to try to wean off of the federal government. But if we don't defeat technocracy, there's no town or state that is going to persist, right? At some point we have to get enough people to understand technocracy and opt out of the technocratic systems in order for cities or states or individuals to be able to thrive with any level of sovereignty.
Amen. I agree.
Yeah, that's the way I feel too. Yeah.
I think we have questions, but I can't read it on the screen. So I think maybe we're going to do a text me the questions because I am visually challenged, but this is too small on the screen. So yeah, but if you have questions, it's :Q. And I did see there was one. Pull it up again. Sorry. Trying to get this to load up. Channel. All right, I'll just read the first one that I see. How far away from 15-minute smart cities and carbon footprints? Oh, how far away are we from 15-minute city? Okay, and then I see the other two questions. So we'll do that one first because I see it. So yes, how far away are we from 15-minute cities and carbon footprints? Well, I think they're already here. We've got the freedom cities, as Trump likes to call them. It's just different marketing for different target audiences. So for the Trumpians, it's a freedom city, and for the UN devotees, it's a C40 city. But they're kind of all the same. Praxis, I would argue, is not necessarily 15-minute, but it's a smart city. And we have several of these network states that are popping up. There's Atlas, which is a subsidiary of Praxis that's in California. That they've just proposed. So we've got a bunch of those. And in terms of carbon footprints, they're going to use different metrics. Obviously, that's the UN energy credit, but I think there might be different marketing for different audiences. So anyone else have thoughts on that?
The only thing that contains people into a 15-minute city is the surveillance mechanism to keep him there. It's not complete at this point. But that doesn't stop them from saying, well, this is going to be this area is going to be a 15-minute city. Some cities already have the circles imposed on their maps, big cities, where they have multiple 15-minute cities in a bigger area. So all that they have to put in place at this point is to get the surveillance system in place where they can fine you or do other stuff to you if you wander outside of that area and you shouldn't be there. This is coming. It's clear at this point they'll have this capability probably in another 2 years, 3 maybe, but you can see the handwriting is on the wall for 15-minute cities. You should oppose it at any cost in your local communities, for sure.
What are the kind of things
we exist in the UK? The UK already has a bunch of these 15-minute cities all over the place. They're trying to get LA to be a 15-minute city before the Olympics. That's one of their plans. Mm-hmm. And they have geofencing technology. So and that's actually pretty advanced. So I don't think it's a huge leap for them to be able to use that technology in order to literally trap people, because they're doing it in the UK. People are getting flagged by the geofence, and then they're being, the police are coming after them. And this was a few years ago even. So this is definitely, the technology is definitely there. But I don't even think they need it, to be really honest. With all of these network states, everything's going to be run through you're going to have an ID to enter the network state. You're going to have they're going to have your biometric data. You're using a very specific currency that's going to be tied to that ID. And so they don't really even need to have a fence where you can't physically step over the line. They can stop your car from running. They can you can't use your digital metrics that is access to money or currency if you go beyond certain zones. So yeah, I know they have already the plans that's part of the plans for Gaza too, right? They have your biometrics is tracking you when you're going from one zone to the next zone. So yeah.
So how can we resist that? Get rid of a phone, maybe, right? Or get an older car that has no tracking capabilities, right? Have that for when you want to go outside the zone. I mean, what are things you would see that would go into that would give us, what are signs when you could see your cities being converted to a 15-minute city? And what do we do to resist that? Like, how do we resist something like that?
Well, I mean, we're seeing people attack these flock cameras, and this is going on in cities in the U.S. I think La Mesa, California, Eugene, Oregon, Suffolk, Virginia. So people are actually starting to tear these things down because these flock cameras are a huge invasion of privacy. Obviously, using de-Googled phones and privacy tools is something else. But, I will tell you that traveling has gotten worse in the last, since Trump. Early on, it was like, oh, he's going to fix the TSA. It is. You now can't take more than 2 computers with you. There are all of these new restrictions that have been put in place. And now if you don't have a real ID, you have to pay $45 each way. So travel's becoming more difficult already. And I can only imagine how much worse it's going to be as a result of what's going on in the Middle East this week. I'm already hearing they're tightening up security at the airports and everything else. And so the sad thing is they're using the Middle East thing as a pretext to clamp down even further. And I bet they will also use it to add more flock cameras, and people will buy it, right? It's like, well, we need to have more surveillance to protect these terror cells from attacking people. You notice there was the shooting in Cincinnati. I don't know if that was attributed to terrorism, but the one in Austin, Texas was attributed to terrorism. And so you can already see people, and I've already put tweets. I'm like, I'm already against the Palantir that they're going to try to roll out for the blowback for the thing that we're doing in the Middle East. But at the same time, are people going to fall for it again? That's what I worry about, because so far they've been able to do Real ID and the Genius Act, the backdoor CBDCs, without an emergency. I think this is the thing that to me is unprecedented, is that they're adding surveillance without an emergency. They were able to do that. So think about how easy it's going to be with an emergency.
Yeah.
Well, and what percent of the population do you think even really has any idea? One, is heard Genius Act, and two, even knows what it has anything to do with? I mean, what percent of the population would you think?
Maybe a few percent, and the Clarity Act is probably less than 1%. I mean, I was speaking at conferences in Mexico that are crypto conferences, and most of the people hadn't heard of the Clarity Act. So I have no idea who's heard of the Clarity Act.
It's not good.
No.
All right, should we move on to the next question? All right, we've got, is any of this AI advancement, if America affecting us in Canada? I read that some of the tech companies are trying to help build data centers here too. I don't know what that word are. I guess it's probably a typo, but companies are trying to build data centers there too. Yeah, there are a bunch of data centers being built in Canada as well. Well, I think that's part of he's talking about annexing Canada as part of the TechNate. So I don't know.
Yeah.
You have thoughts on that? No. If not, we'll move on. Oh, what?
No,
What do you?
I don't have anything on that. I just haven't researched it.
Yeah, I haven't researched it much either. My thought was just the gut reaction that, it's part of the TechNate, and then he's possibly hoping that we're gonna annex it. Okay, so next question was, how safe are Signal and Telegram? So I personally don't think they're super safe. I mean, the Signal was created by the CIA, and Telegram's Russian. So I think they can take your text and monitor it, right? So I don't know. The camera is always on everything. All of these apps have some sort of interoperability. So I guess it depends on what you mean by safe. How is that defined? But I don't think anything is truly like outside of their purview.
My guess is they can probably see the stuff, but they can't use it in court without revealing that they can use it. One of those kinds of things. So they can't use it as discovery. Although we've had situations here where, part of the issue is we had a politician here locally who made some comment that was taken out of context in a Signal group, but somebody screenshotted that and put it out publicly. Obviously, that's not proof in court, but nevertheless, depending on who you're talking to or what the circumstances are, there's still ways to get at that information.
It's also leverage, right? Like, even if they don't use it, it's not viable in court. It could still be leveraged to extort, blackmail, all sorts of fun things, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Do you believe that the robots they're advertising are all true, or are many of the videos AI generated for hype? It's an interesting question. I mean, I think some of them are definitely real, but I don't know if there's more that are being hyped up.
The first wave of Optimus robots have been pledged by Elon Musk to populate his factories with. And so apparently you're not going to see him on the street probably in this year. But he's decided in his mind, maybe just recently, that he's going to dedicate all the robots that he makes this year to work in his own factories. That means there's going to be mass layoffs at Tesla at some point. It's going to be ugly.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, he was saying like the robots are going to train the other robots, and they're going to make the other robots too.
That's right.
I know that the one company I've been very interested in is something called Realbotics, and I think I brought it up before, but I'm just interested in because they're very humanoid and they're specifically tailored for the hospitality and therapy industries. So they're using that like very real like skin that sweats, like the DARPA skin, and so it's trying to mimic human emotion. So your therapist could be a robot, for human interaction. And this is just incredibly concerning to me because it's so dehumanizing. And I know this won't be super popular for a lot of people, but I'll say it anyway. I'm doing a show next week on Botox, and I actually think that a lot of what Botox, like that standard that they're setting, is about this robotics industry. Because if you think about it, part of how people have empathy is by using mirror neurons, and the neuromuscular activity to the brain is we mimic like somebody else's emotion. And we actually do that neuromuscularly. And so when we don't have that connectivity, it actually down regulates our empathy. And that's been studied, it's been shown. But if the standards are now set lower and everybody's frozen, I mean, not everybody, but now that's become kind of much more normalized than to have a robot be your therapist that has no expression at all, right? I know it sounds creepy, but I honestly, I think there's something there. And it's very, very disturbing. And it's very disturbing what it does to, I mean, parents who have children. We saw what the mask did, right? It stunted their cognitive development, stunted their emotional development. They're showing that it stunts the children's development. And I think this is paving the way. What's going to happen when you have robots who are, the nannies and taking care of the children? But this is kind of an entryism, in my opinion, to that. Okay, so we have next question. See if we see it on this. Let's see on the screen. Are there any more questions? Oh no. Okay. All right. I think then we will wrap it up. The next one is going to be April 8th. Let me double check. That's what we agreed on. Yeah, April 8th at 6 o'clock Eastern. And we're going to talk about Pax Silica. So, yeah. Well, I'll let everybody go around. And if they have any closing words, and I'll, of course, tell everybody where they can find you and all the great work that each of you are doing. So let's start with you, Craig.
Okay, great. Yeah, so this great for me. I enjoy being a part of these because I learn so much and makes me think about a lot. I want to go back and rewatch this and and think about ways. I think the biggest thing for me is I guess the big fear is how do they roll this out, and are we going to get like what we talked about, some sort of an event, that will bring the system down, because that relates back to me with the markets. And I feel like these markets, again, back to BlackRock, back to these people that control these markets, there's clearly control going on in these markets right now. I mean, I can feel it. Like there's somebody big out there that's able to move these markets. And for instance, like crude oil, I would say that's just a victim of what's going on in the Middle East with the Strait of Hormuz, which we'll hear a million times over the next 4 weeks, right? That, the fear of the Strait of Hormuz. But I think the big thing is, some sort of an event, right, that's going to bring the system down, that's going to put us in a position where we're going to be forced into further into their little circle, and once you go in, it's very hard to come back out of that circle. Once you give up that autonomy, that freedom, that free will, that's what concerns me so much, and I think if we don't take back some of our 401ks, if we don't just say, look, we're going to do this alone, get it out of BlackRock, I think we've got big problems ahead, and it's a very tough battle because they just keep adding assets under management. Like it's, like nobody cares. And I just don't know if people are aware when they put their money in there, they're giving up control, and it's going to come back to bite us at some point. And so that's a big thing. I think there's so many things I learned tonight, but I think that's one of the biggest ones that, that if we go down some sort of an event path like that and we get some sort of a shutdown, electronic shutdown or something like that, they're going to push us further into that circle, and it's going to be very hard to get back out. So just, heed that warning. And because I know I will, I'm looking for other ways. That's why I like Aaron. What he's doing so much is how do we get some of this stuff into a different system, an alternate system, a different highway? Because I think it's so important, because if we stay in this system, we're going to have some headaches ahead. That's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Tell everybody where they can find you. And
Yeah, so I do a show on Rumble, X, and YouTube in the mornings, 8 a.m. called World HD, where we go through, the economic data, look through the markets, do a lot of charting, use harmonics, right? So it's a different way of going about things where I look at the harmonic structures and then we look at the information. So we look at these cyclical patterns that exist in nature first, and then we look at the news to see, does it apply to that, right? So it's sort of a reverse way of getting at it. Instead of looking at the media and the data and taking in what they want us to think about, we go the other way. We look at this and then we say, how much of that information can we just throw down the drain, and how much of it's actually valuable? What's really going on here? So really trying to sort through what's going on with stocks, bonds, the commodity markets, currency markets, different things like that. And so that's the best place to catch anything else on this is World HD in the mornings, probably on Rumble, because there's a chat that goes on in there, and it's pretty small, but it's actually a pretty active chat. It's amazing how active the participants are in there. So they seem to enjoy it. So that's a good thing.
Yeah, for sure. Aaron?
Yeah, I would just summarize by saying that threat of technocracy is real. It is the biggest threat that we face, and that we're really in this battle of technocracy versus freedom, and free will is at stake, and that people need to take it seriously, learn about it immediately, read The Final Betrayal. I highly recommend your book, and it's a quick read, but it's an important read. But also to understand that, it's not all the black pill situation. We all have the capacity to take back our free will. And that is the key to this. And so you can find me at Aaron R. Day, and also daylightfreedom.org, where I have a lot of content on both technocracy and things that we can do to reclaim our sovereignty.
Awesome.
That's good. Yeah. Everybody can find me at technocracy.news. That's where I have all my work for 15 years now. A lot of stuff. If you sign up for our premium access plan, you can have access, I think, to almost 7,000 articles posted over the last several years. It's just amazing that I've come this far, I guess. That I can't imagine doing all that work, but here it is. So our books are there, and also on Amazon as well. The audiobook is on Amazon, so the Kindle is there as well. And of course, the paperback. If you're hearing this broadcast in another country like Canada, UK, Europe, whatever, Australia, go to Amazon to get the book there in your own country. Because if you shop here in America, I'll have to charge you more than the book is worth to get it to you by mail. That's just the way the sign that adds up right now. So it's crazy. I understand, but this is the reality that we lived in. So yes, absolutely read our book, get the audio book. People are really sucking that up. They like the idea of the narration like this. It's so easy to listen. 3.5 hours, you'll get it immediately.
Yeah. And there's also, isn't the book.by/Patrick Wood, isn't that a flat fee for people outside the country?
This is a good choice for people outside of the country. You might have to wait for your book because they don't ship express. But if you can wait, you can get, usually they charge like $5 for shipping to any country on the planet. I haven't verified just how fast it is. This is the problem at this point, because they're not going to use like express mail to get to you. But if you can handle that, go for books by /Patrick Wood, I think it is.
Books.by /Patrick Wood.
Exactly.
Yeah. Great. Yeah, and I'm Courtney Turner, and you can find me at CourtneyTurner.com. I spell my name differently. It's spelled like Courtenay. So you have to spell it that way, otherwise you won't find me. But you can go to Courtenay.show, and that'll have all of my links, my Substack and the book, various podcast platforms. And you'll see me back here next month, April 8th. We are scheduled at 6 o'clock Eastern. And as always, thank you all. Thank you to the Knights, and thank you to the audience, and for everybody who asked questions. And we'll see you next time.